Na, 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 na. Na, 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 na. אדם בתוך עצמו הוא גר, בתוך עצמו הוא גר. לפעמים עצוב אמר הוא, לפעמים הוא שר, לפעמים פותח דלת לקבל מכה, אבל לרוב אדם בתוך עצמו נסגר. אדם בתוך עצמו הוא גר, בתוך עצמו הוא גר. או באיזו עיר סוערת, או באיזה כפר. לפעמים סופה עוברת, וביתו נשבר. אבל...
Well, good afternoon to all and welcome. My name is Danny Schultz and I am your host for today's Israel Connections series, Kibbutz Life Today. We were just listening to Adam B'toch Atzmo, Man Living Unto Himself, Shalom Chanoch's 1977 hit from his first solo album, chosen because Chanoch, considered perhaps the father of Israeli rock, grew up on kibbutz mishmarot. So today's event is presented by both SPACA, Students and Parents Against Campus Anti-Semitism, and the Westchester Jewish Council. I'm proud to be a member of the board of the WJC and chair of our Israel Affairs Committee. And as most of you know, the WJC is an umbrella organization representing over 135 Jewish organizations, schools, synagogues, and institutions in Westchester, New York, the 8th largest Jewish community in the United States, totaling over 150,000 citizens. One of those member organizations is SPACA, and joining us from SPACA today is Shoshana Biederman, the founder, who will say a few words about her organization. Shoshana, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Hi to the Chevre on the kibbutz and everybody in Israel. Students and Parents Against Campus Anti-Semitism, SPACA, is a grassroots organization that was founded in 2014 in Westchester, New York, and we are very proud to be members of the Westchester Jewish Council. We want to thank WJC's Pam Goldstein, Helene Schonbrun, and Lori Corlander for working with us on this program. At SPACA, we educate high school students and prepare them to deal with anti-Semitism and anti-Israel campaigns on college campuses. We believe that when students are well informed about Israel's history, the changing Middle East, and the pluralistic democratic society that is Israel, they feel confident in engaging in Jewish advocacy, Jewish life on campus, in building bridges and affect positive change. This program has been a labor of love in more than one way, and Danny will explain what I mean by that. But I want to thank our wonderful speakers, Netta, Tom, and Mara, and Danny, the best moderator we could ask for. And toda rabah to everyone.
Well, it indeed has been a labor of love. We added a new kibbutz member during this process, which is why we had to delay our show for a few weeks. Tom and Mara had a new baby girl, Adar, who is maybe in the show. I'm not sure if she's in the show today, but mazal tov to you and congratulations. And I'm glad we've been able to pull it off. So now for the main card, Kibbutz Life Today. The word kibbutz, as many of you know, comes from the word kibbutzah, which means group. What do we know about the kibbutz? How has it evolved through the years? How has it grown and developed in Israel? And what is it like living on a kibbutz today? and frankly, what will it be like in the future? We have a lot to cover. We don't have a lot of time, but first, a little trivia question for everyone. What do Jerry Seinfeld, Sacha Baron Cohen, Sigourney Weaver, Simon LeBon, yes, of Duran Duran, Deborah Winger, and even Bob Hoskins all have in common? Don't all answer at once. I'll give you the answer. They all worked and lived on kibbutzim. So let's dive in. We have our own 3 outstanding guests to talk to us about kibbutzim. They will share their stories and give us insight into kibbutzim in general and into the very unique kibbutz they are from, in addition to answering our questions. Where is this kibbutz? Well, let's take a look. As you can see, we are southeast of Tel Aviv. And there is the kibbutz. We might even be able to see Tom and Mara and their kids if we look really closely. And give you a little bit better perspective as we zoom out, you'll see that it is not far from Tel Aviv Yafo, and it is in the Merkaz in central Israel. Since we're looking at the kibbutz, I also want to give a special shout out to all the members of Kibbutz Netzer Sereni who are actually watching with us today. Thank you all for joining us, and kol hakavod to you for your work and building Kibbutz Netzer Sereni. Today's guests are Dr. Netta Lipman, Mara Seidel Appelstein, and Tom Appelstein. This is an impressive crew. We have a lot to cover. Let me briefly run through their bios. I believe we have a more extensive bio as a link. So let's get going. Netta was born and raised, our only member, born and raised on Kibbutz Netzer Sereni. Her grandparents, both sets, are kibbutz founders and Holocaust survivors. She has a PhD in environmental justice from Tel Aviv University, is the former CEO of the Israeli Society of Ecology and Environmental Sciences, and currently writes a column on the environment for Haaretz. She's currently on sabbatical in New York City with her husband and 3 sons. Her husband, who is a professor at the Weizmann Institute, is, of course, on sabbatical working at Facebook. Mara Ar-Olah is originally from Delaware and came to Israel on a Masa Israel 5-month internship program, working with refugees from Darfur. Upon finishing her degree at Virginia Tech, Mara worked at UMass Hillel staffing birthright trips. And after her Masa work, she stayed, officially making Aliyah in 2009 and became one of Israel's esteemed tour guides. So she knows her way around. Currently, she is running Bayit Brigade, a nonprofit providing affordable housing for lone soldiers, a whole nother subject. Mara lives on Kibbutz Netzer Sereni with her husband, Tom, and they're now 3 children, including their newest, as I mentioned. The other 2 are who? Geffen?
Geffen and Noga.
And Noga and Adag. Okay. And Tom is our city boy from Ramat Gan, moved at age 8 to the kibbutz with his family. After serving as a field unit officer in the IDF, he took a 9-year leave from the kibbutz. So we're going to touch on that. He went and practiced commercial law, returning to the kibbutz in 2013, and then getting involved in actually running the kibbutz as a board member. Tom received his law degree in law and business administration, as well as an MA in political science, both from Tel Aviv University, and he now runs a boutique law firm practicing commercial litigation and tender law. And of course, he serves as a captain in the IDF reserves. So, Tom, HarperCollins Dictionary says a kibbutz is, quote, a collective agricultural settlement in modern Israel owned and administered communally by its members and on which children are reared collectively. That's their definition. The kibbutz is clearly a unique and distinct communal living society. Give us a little history lesson about the origins of the kibbutz and how it has evolved. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Danny. Hi, everyone, and thank you for having us. I think the beginning should be the first kibbutz is Kibbutz Dgania, and some of the participants of this event might be surprised that the first kibbutz was established about 40 years before the State of Israel was founded. So the whole area that we now know as the State of Israel was just another remote and unimportant part of the Ottoman Empire, and the Turkish government was ruling here. So the people that came here, the first Zionist pioneers that came in the second and third Aliyah, wanted to settle the land, came out of Zionist values, and they decided the best way to do that will be as a group. Rather than being just independent farmers and own lands, they decided that being a group would be more efficient and more safe for them in this hostile environment back in 1909. So they decided to incorporate as a kibbutz, dealing with agriculture and then later on industry. Following kibbutz Dgania, several other kibbutzim was founded in the 1920s and then in the 1930s and so on and so forth. The first kibbutzim, if some of you might know the names, are Merchavia, Kibbutz Kinneret, Kibbutz Eilet HaShachar, Kibbutz Ein Harod. These are the first kibbutzim. So like I said, why a kibbutz? It had practical reasons and it had ideological reasons, both combined. And during the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, most of the kibbutzim that we know today were established. The fame, I think the fame and glory of the kibbutzim was due to their contribution to the execution of the Zionist project. So kibbutzim had a very important role in everything that's connected to defending the land, providing working places, agriculture. A famous example that everybody probably knows is Choma Migdal, Tower and Stockade. More than 50 settlements were established overnight between 1936 and 1939 in order to mark the land in view of future partition. The contribution of kibbutz members to the defense of Israel was much greater than their relative part in the population. A few numbers to give an example. In 1967, the Six-Day War, about 25% of the fallen soldiers in the war were kibbutz members, despite their relative part in the population was only 3%. Okay, in the Yom Kippur War, 1973, about 18% of the fallen soldiers were kibbutz members, although there are only 2% of the population of Israel. And that gives you an idea about how important their role was in the IDF, and not only as, not only as soldiers, but also as commanders and generals and people that led the IDF into achievements in those years. And not only in the military, also in the industry and agriculture and even, pop culture. Kibbutzim had a lot of contribution, and in those decades, 50s, 60s, 70s, that's where the fame and glory of the kibbutzim became the biggest. And if you try to look at the average life of a kibbutz member back in those years, I mean, until the 90s, it was pretty similar in most kibbutzim. So each kibbutz member works as much as he can and takes as much as he needs. There's no salaries. Nobody earns a personal salaries. Everybody gets a certain steady amount, fixed amount of money from the kibbutz according to the number of people in the family. So you could be a big shot working in a very important job, and your neighbor could be just, somebody who's doing a very simple job and doesn't work very hard. You both got the same budget from the kibbutz. There's no salaries. And if you needed something, in most cases, you got it within the kibbutz. So there was a supermarket, there's a laundry. If you needed clothes, if you need anything, you get it in the kibbutz. And if you need, in special cases, you need to get something from the outside, you can go to the kuppah of the kibbutz, take out money, and go outside and buy whatever you need outside. But most of your needs are inside the community. The community provides most of what you need. There's no private assets. People don't own private cars. People don't own private property. People don't own washing machines. They do all the, all the laundry in the main laundry. People don't hold a very equipped kitchen because all the meals are in the dining room. You don't need to cook. Most kibbutz members work in the kibbutz, in the factories, or in the agriculture. And that means that the dining room of the kibbutz is the center and the heart of the kibbutz. Everybody meets everybody during breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Everybody knows each other very well. You hardly have any friends from outside of the kibbutz because you work with the same people and you see the same people all day. The profession that you practice is not what you want to do, is what the kibbutz tells you to do. So you finish the army at age 21, and even if you're a very talented musician or very talented artist, or you can be a math scientist, but the kibbutz needs a plumber at that certain time, the kibbutz is going to send you to study how to be a plumber, and that's what you're going to do. So you don't have, in most cases, you don't have a say about what your career would be. If you want to go to university and study study something, you need to get the confirmation of the kibbutz general assembly to go and study something. And I think in most cases in those years, you would not get permission if it's not contributing anything to the community. Nobody is putting money on the side for pension or for retirement, because everybody knows that once you're getting old, the kibbutz will take care of you. You don't need to do that by yourself. Some of the people, or even most of the people, don't own a bank account because they don't need one. They have they have the kibbutz kupa, they have the kibbutz budget, and they get everything from the community. All the kids are educated in the kibbutz system. In some of the kibbutzim, as some of you might know, the kids don't sleep with the parents. So they all sleep together since a very young age. And this, I'm glad to say, it stopped over the years, and the last kibbutz stopped doing that in 1997. So jumping a few decades ahead into the 90s and the 80s and the 90s, the last 20 years of the 20th century were not very good for the kibbutzim. There were big crises in many kibbutzim. It's a long story, so I don't want to get too deep into it, but we're talking about bad management of kibbutz industry. We're talking about people losing faith in the communal idea, and also the Zionist contribution that was very much present in the 30s, 40s, and 50s were not as present during the 90s and 20s. So the whole kibbutz idea is starting to shake a little bit. And in about 2000, a new model of kibbutzim is evolving, and it's called the renewed kibbutz. So the renewed kibbutz is a kibbutz that the level of communal relationship between the members is lower than a traditional kibbutz, and this is something that characterizes kibbutzim. Usually they don't have a very strong source of income, like a strong factory or strong holding in a company. Those kibbutzim, the members of those kibbutzim are looking for a better level of life, and they don't see that the kibbutz will be able to provide that. So those kibbutzim are trying to look into other forms of communal life. The term renewed kibbutz, it's a legal term, it's a legal definition, and it means that this kibbutz has one of three. One, differential income for the members, meaning not everybody gets the same. Each member gets according to what he makes, okay, depending on his job. That's one. Two, privatization of houses, having the members legally own their houses. And three, privatization of the kibbutz assets. For example, if the kibbutz holds shares in a factory or a company, the kibbutz can allocate the shares to the members, and in that way, they privatize the assets. So if the kibbutz has one of those three situations, it's defined as a renewed kibbutz. So looking at today, we have 265 kibbutzim in Israel, which has about 2% of the population. Only 20% of the kibbutzim today are still traditional kibbutzim. and about 80% are renewed kibbutzim. In many of the renewed kibbutzim, you will find privatization of houses. You will find both privatization of houses, both differential income, and both privatization of assets. So if we're trying to look, the definition, the subject of this event today is life on kibbutz today. It's very difficult to define this term life on kibbutz today in a way that fits all kibbutzim, because there's a big range and big differences between kibbutzim. It depends if you're a traditional kibbutz or a renewed kibbutz. It also depends a lot on the geography, because kibbutzim in the far north or down south of Israel do not look like kibbutzim in the center of Israel. In the kibbutzim in the center, most young people stay in the kibbutz after they graduate from school or they have a profession. They want to grow their family there because all the working places are close. And in the kibbutzim that are up north or down south, where there's less working places, many of the young people do not return. So every kibbutz has its own rules, his own characters, and is very different from the other. If you're looking at communal traditional kibbutzim, in most cases you will see a strong factory. Many of the members are working in the kibbutz. There's an active dining room. The community is very homogenic. Few people come from the outside. Examples for kibbutzim like that will be Chatzerim, Kibbutz Be'eri, Gan Shmuel, Ma'agan Michael, Mishmar HaEmek, Tzuba. In renewed kibbutz, they don't have a strong factory. The dining room will be less active because most of the members work outside the kibbutz. They're not there during working hours. A lot of kibbutzim shut down the dining room completely. There's no dining room anymore. In some kibbutzim that privatize the houses, members can rent their homes, which is something that in our kibbutz, for example, sounds crazy. But if you go on Airbnb and look for an apartment in kibbutz Dafna, you will find ones, because it's a renewed kibbutz. The members own the houses. The members can do whatever they want with their houses, and they can also rent their homes in Airbnb. So one thing you can say about kibbutzim is it's usually small communities, not more than usually 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 people. A lot of people know each other. There's a feeling of community. In renewed kibbutzim, young people who are today, let's say in their 40s and 50s, can fulfill themselves, go to study whatever they want. They usually their income is above the average in the Israeli society. The older people in the kibbutz are usually, in most kibbutzim, as far as I know, are taking care of the kibbutz, takes care for everything they need. So basically, I think, being a kibbutznik today in Israel, it's a good thing, but it's very different between one kibbutz to the other. Looking at our kibbutz, Netzer Sireni, Neta will dig into the facts more in a minute, but just in terms of general look, Netzer Sireni is a great place to live. It's a community about half an hour from Tel Aviv. We have about 900 people in the kibbutz, 450 members, 350 kids, which is a lot. There's a lot of kids here, which is good. There's about 100 people that are non-members. We adopted the model of a renewed kibbutz in terms of differential income. So like I said before, not everybody gets the same. Everybody gets depending on what they do and how much they make. We do not own our houses. The kibbutz still owns the houses, and this is something that we wanted to stay as is. And we pay for facilities. So we pay for the dining room if we use it. We pay for the swimming pool. We pay for in the supermarket. We pay for the kindergartens. We pay for the laundry. And I'm happy to say that we have I think a strong community, and all in all, it's a good place to live. So in that point, I will hand it over to Neta, or maybe Danny, you'll take it and continue from there.
On mute.
There we go. Here we go. Unmute me. Tom, thank you. That was outstanding. And Netta, we're going to turn to you now. You are, of course, the real Vatika or veteran of the three. You're a third generation kibbutz member. And I know you're going to tell us more about kibbutz Netzer Sereni and some of its history, including the meaning of Netzer Sereni. I just want to say, when I was doing some of my own research today,
joined the meeting.
When I was doing some of my own research for today, I, of course, went to Wikipedia. And if you look up kibbutz in Wikipedia and you scroll down, I believe below types of kibbutzim, I was kind of shocked. The first one listed is a kibbutz Buchenwald, a kibbutz actually named after a concentration camp. How is that even possible? Well, Netta is going to answer that question, but first we're going to run a great clip, intro clip on the kibbutz, and then Netta, the floor will be yours. So Lori, roll 'em.
גן העדן הזה שאנחנו רואים כאן הוא פרי עמלם של אנשים מיוחדים מאוד. כולם שרדו את זוועות השואה ומצאו את העוז והכוח להקים חיים חדשים.
כשיצאתי וראיתי שם בחלון איזה בחור, רק עצמות ורק עיניים. זה התברר, זה אני הייתי.
הייתה סלקציה. חלק שלחו ימינה, שמאלה, ואיפה שהיה ימינה, אז זה נשאר למחנה, ויתר שלחו לתאי הגזים. ואני נשארתי שם לבד.
והייתי מאושר, כשנשארתי בחיים, יכולתי להקים משפחה.
אני רציתי שנקים קיבוצים של שרידי שואה. זה לא הייתה כל התוכנית.
אז הייתה אסיפה, והאסיפה, הם החליטו שעולים למקום, היינו 15 איש, והתמקמנו כאן, והתחלנו להתחפר.
נצר סירני הוא סיפור ייחודי בהיסטוריה. איך משאול תחתית נמצא הכוח, ונמצאה היכולת לבנות, לעשות, ליצור ולהתחיל בהקמת חיים חדשים.
אני רציתי להתחיל את חיי כפועל פשוט.
רציתי לבנות לי חיים כמו שלא קרה שום דבר.
היות ואתה אדם לבד, אתה רוצה לייחד במשהו, לנסות להיות ביחד
Yeah, well, as you can see, like the second woman in the video was my grandma, this grandma that came from Auschwitz, and she met my grandpa Aaron Batzia just after the war, and all they had was, as they said, the clothes on their body and no family, no relatives. So they became a group, and they called themselves Buchenwald, and this is how they like and identified themselves. Then came to Israel, as Tomer said before, to Dgania, the Fur Kibbutz, to do the Hachshara. This is where my grandparents were married. And then they came to Netzer Sireni, as you said, 20 minutes from Tel Aviv, and the rest is history. Talking of history, like the name Buchenwald was long gone, but then they had like two names. One name, Lori, can we put the slide? So this is, Netzer Sireni means two things. The first Netzer is like the offshot, or the growing side of the tree stump. And it symbolized how those people felt like, you know, being the only one after this terrible war, but they're starting something new after surviving the Holocaust. Netzer in Hebrew means brown, short, or sprout. And the second name is Sereni, of the memory of Enzo Sereni, a Jewish brigada officer. Sereni was the founder of kibbutz Givat Brenner, a nearby kibbutz, and he was parachuted in Nazi-occupied Italy in the Second World War and got captured by the Germans and executed in Dachau concentration camp. And this is how they saw themselves, like we want to build a new society, a new community that will bring new life, but we also have two groups. One came from Poland and the other came from Givat Brenner from Italy. And this is a little bit my story, my family story. Both sides, like from my mother's side, they came from Poland and from Auschwitz, had no family. And from my father's side, they came from Italy with little family, but the only one nearly in Israel. So this is how I grew up. The only thing I knew was Netzer Sireni, was kibbutz Netzer Sireni. As Tom was saying, at the first they had like Bet Yeladim, where kids lived and slept without their parents. Being a kibbutz of Holocaust survivor, we stopped this after a couple of years, and we had only Bet Yeladim, where you go to after school and where you play with your friends and you have your after school activities, and then you go home. And, you know, growing up in a community that's really like a family, friends are like family. Tom was saying about a lot of kids nowadays, a lot of kids all time, like this is what you see. This is the group that ended high school and they're putting a big show. We saw the slide of like 40 years ago, the show, and this is 2 years ago, a tradition of kids that are doing things for the community and with the community. Danny we're gonna talk, like dive in about how is it to growing up in a community where everyone knows everyone and how you feel like home, but this is home. Like this is the fields and we're in the middle of very suburban area, but still we have fields to run in, and it's a special place to grow in. And Danny, I think I'm gonna turn it back to you.
Back to me. Okay, well, Netta, thank you. First of all, that was incredibly moving. And I just want to remind everybody that before we jump into the discussion with our kibbutz members, everybody, please just remember to use your chat window on Zoom if you have a question, and I'll do my best to bring them up during our conversation or later when we get to Q&A. So let's jump in. We have a lot to cover. And so Netta and Tom and Mara, I may skip over some of our voluminous questions here, but let's start with this. You have all lived both inside, within, and outside the kibbutz. Can you tell each of you, can you tell us, what do you see yourselves as gaining, and what would you say you're giving up with kibbutz life? And try and keep that to 30 seconds each, if that's humanly possible. Fire away.
Okay.
Well, yours. No, Mara.
Something I would say for me, gaining, because I made Aliyah, because my family is all still in the States. For me, it's gaining a family. So I have a community. It's kind of like ingrained in when you're living here. And so it's something to start with. So for me, that's a huge piece. And then on the other hand, of course, what I'm giving up is that my side of the family is so far away. But it's a good place to be if I do choose to be in Israel.
Well, I gained family as well. I needed to go out to see the world because, like I said, I grew up and all I knew was only kibbutz Netzer Sireni. I never like celebrated Passover outside the kibbutz. I don't know the songs because the kibbutz and like have his own Passover Agadah. So I needed to be outside. I was in Tel Aviv. I was in Princeton University. I was in Rehovot in Weizmann Institute. But when I came back, I felt like I had a full circle, and this is the place where I want my kids to be raised, and I want the family, and I want the friends, and like friends are even to family, and it's a great feeling to be like that.
So Mary, you you grew up in the States, young American growing up in Delaware. What was at the time, I mean, did you have a sense of what a kibbutz was? Is it very different from what you had imagined, actually now living in a kibbutz? Or was it similar?
Growing up, like I grew up, it wasn't something where I want to make aliyah or this was always where I wanted to be. Life kind of happened and I went with it. But I guess like growing up and thinking about the kibbutzim, or my first time when I went on birthright and I came to Israel, and the idea of this kibbutz, like what Tom first described, like this very Zionist agricultural place where everyone is wearing like the kova tembel and working in the fields. It's very different to what I thought, but on the other hand, very much it still is that the wheat field, like you look out of our window, it's the wheat fields. So it does have that piece to it where connected to nature. But I guess I didn't really have a clear idea of what kibbutz meant growing up, as opposed to now living it.
Totally understandable. And what made you, I guess, at peace with adopting the kibbutz lifestyle? Obviously, Tom was part of the package and his family was already there, but I imagine the two of you might have chosen to live maybe in some other suburb as well outside of Tel Aviv. So, what was the main selling point in the end?
I was 5 years in Tel Aviv before moving to the kibbutz. And once after we were married, Tom brought up this wacky idea of leaving the city and moving here. But it's kind of that same idea where, talking about like Westchester, the idea of moving from, say, the city, if you're moving from Manhattan, out into the suburbs, because for the same reason we wanted to get married, we were looking to start a family, we wanted to have more space. And the city is just, you can commute in a train ride as well. So it was that feeling of like, okay, we did the city thing. We're ready to come back, and also the rent is very much different it's a lot cheaper to live here than opposed to the city prices. Tel Aviv is now like the most expensive city in the world. So that was also a big factor. And I was like very, very anxious, very nervous about it when I first came. I was living in an American bubble, or I was living in this like English bubble, and then you come to the kibbutz and I'm not going to walk around and speak English. It's a Hebrew environment. It's a totally different culture. And so for me, I was very nervous to jump in. I was very nervous to be completely out of my element and jump into Israeli society and like kind of leave the American bubble behind. I can get into this later if you want me to get into this now, but raising a family here, like what Netta said, it's the most incredible place to raise children. And I am very happy that we live here. In fact, I think that there's a statistic that says like 70% of English speakers go back to their home country after making Aliyah within the first 3 years. And I feel that if we were living in the 4th floor of a random apartment in a random place in Israel, I don't know if I would still be here. And I feel like the kibbutz and the community and the family and everything that comes with it is the reason why I've been here for 13 years, and very happy to raise my 3 children here.
And how many years on kibbutz? Were you on kibbutz before you had your kids?
Yeah. So it was first 5 years in Tel Aviv, and then we've been here, if I do the math, it's 8 years.
and Tom and Netta, let me ask the two of you. Both of you each left the kibbutz at different times. Why was that? And was it important to leave and spread your wings? And is there attrition among kibbutzim with young people leaving and not everyone returning?
For me, I was waiting to leave the kibbutz for a few years in my 20s. This is usually the years that you feel that you need to go out and like do crazy things and fulfill yourself and explore things. So I just felt the need to do that. And I lived in Tel Aviv for 9 years. think it's very important to leave to get a perspective. And I see even in our kibbutz, I see people, young people that never left, that sometimes can't appreciate, what the kibbutz is giving them, and they're like, trying to like pick to the little things and not see the big picture. So definitely, I think it's very important.
That's interesting. Yeah, Netta, what about you?
Yeah, well, when I met my husband, we moved to Tel Aviv because we studied in Tel Aviv University, and then we went abroad to Princeton because of his postdoc, and then we came back to Rehovot because of Weizmann Institute and his position. So this is like the round I've done. But as Tom said, like I feel it was very needy for me to see the outside world, to feel it, to know other cultures, to have another seder for that matter, and then to come back different. And this is the place, as Mera said, the best place to raise my kids, but I needed to see other places. And, I am now, having said that, I am in New York City now, but then again, I'm just like, tasting it. I'm gonna go back in the summer and not willing or wanting to stay here, just like, visit for a while.
Right, understandable. And in terms of attrition though, I would assume there is though attrition where young people, not everybody does return. Is that an issue for kibbutzim, or is there enough sort of net gain or recruiting and people moving into the kibbutz? I guess Mara, you're a net gain on the in the kibbutz membership roles.
Do you like how we get into the kibbutz?
No, I'm just saying, is attrition a problem? Are kibbutzim, losing people? You described being very happy to be going back or joining, but is that an issue at all today for kibbutzim, or is kibbutz lifestyle ascendant? I mean, I think you described some elements of the kibbutz that are very attractive to many people.
So I think it depends on the geography mostly, because if you're a kibbutz in the north or in the south, and there's not a lot of working places around you, many of the young people would not return. And then people from the outside that can find work in that area will look to get into the kibbutz. So in those kibbutzim, you will see a lot of change of members in the community, and there's new blood, and it's not a bad thing. I mean, I think it's an interesting thing, and it's it's renewing the kibbutz in a different way, as opposed to kibbutzim in the center where everything is near you and there's a lot of factories and companies and high tech, and you can do whatever you want. In those kibbutzim, most of the young people will return to raise their family there.
Right. And are there actual policies around kibbutzim and having a leave of absence if you go and study somewhere else or work somewhere else, and then want to come back to the kibbutz? How does that work if you're on hiatus? Is there such a thing, and you retain your sort of kibbutz citizenship?
It varies and it changed. Tom will know because he practically wrote it for our kibbutz, but it changes during time. But I was away for 13 years, I think. And, I kept my membership and up until I came back. I'm not sure it's wise, like now we're changing the protocol, but each kibbutz is setting his own rules and how his member feels it's supposed to be. Right, Tom?
So yeah, so like Netta said, each kibbutz has their own rules about it. In our kibbutz, for many years, I think maybe for 20 years, there was a thing that people are kibbutz members, but they don't actually live on the kibbutz. They can be kibbutz members and live in Tel Aviv, and nobody asked them to return. And about 2 or 3 years ago, we made a decision in the General Assembly of the kibbutz that if you want to stay a kibbutz member, you have to live here. And if you don't live in the kibbutz now, you have 4 years to come back. And if you don't come back in 4 years, your membership will expire. And lately, some of the kibbutz members that didn't want to come back waived their membership. So they're not members anymore.
Now, I would imagine that is a decision taken by the board of any kibbutz, feeling fairly upbeat about the financial profile of the kibbutz, because you I guess would allow people to be tethered far from the grounds of the kibbutz if you needed their income financially, maybe. But it sounds like that's a positive statement about being able to attract new people. If kibbutzim are willing to cut members off if they're not living there, it sounds like a very positive statement about people's desires to join or return to kibbutzim. Is that a correct inference, you think?
In our case, yes, because again, we're in the center of Israel, and there's more people who want to be members than people who don't want to be members.
Right.
And this decision was made out of it came from a value from values. You know, we made a decision that the term kibbutz member cannot be unreal. If you're a kibbutz member and you don't live here, you don't have no connection to the place, you have to come back, or don't be a member, which is also fine. You don't have to.
Right. Just so everybody understands, because I'm not sure, if you're living outside the kibbutz in Tel Aviv, though, where's your income going? But you're a member and it goes into the kibbutz, or you retain it?
So there's a term called atzmaut kalkalit, which means financial independence, and that's a status that you can be in that status when you live outside the kibbutz, and then your income goes to you, and then when you come to the kibbutz, your income goes into the kibbutz kupa.
So that's quite a free ride for a while. Okay, very helpful. So, Tom, you mentioned it. There are some other well-known kibbutzim or wealthier kibbutzim, such as Magan Michael, known for Plason, and Sdot Yam, Kibbutz Chatzerim with its drip irrigation. They're not the majority, but is there a desire at Netzer Sereni or others? You know, is there sort of talk about, you know, how do we come up with an industry winner to give a kibbutz and its members real financial freedom? Is that kind of a topic of can we create an industry where we can really build a big exportable business, whatever it may be? It may not be marble, it may be flowers, it may be computers, it may be
high tech,
it may, maybe food. I don't know, but is that an issue or a concept that is discussed, or is everybody sort of being professors or being attorneys or what have you?
I think it's not only a question, I think it's the question.
Okay.
And I think it's the topic on the kibbutz agenda nowadays, because what's interesting about our case is that we made very bad investments and business decisions in the 90s. We invested in a factory that was supposed to manufacture devices to treat with allergic,
like a runny nose.
Like runny nose problems, medical devices that was supposed to treat that. It looked at the time like a very good business decision, and the kibbutz invested millions building that factory, and it failed. And the kibbutz got into really big financial problems. And since then, on the financial side, I think we're a bit in a trauma of investing a lot of money in something that might not work and put us back in that situation. So the kibbutz is really
careful. Right.
Yeah, looking for something.
But it started from a factory, right? But we were established by a factory that after, I don't know, 20, 30 years worked with 70 countries global-wise. Like we started with those bed that the military needed. So we asked the kibbutz, would you mind doing those beds? And then they become like a huge factory of trailers working with the states and 70 countries. So as Tom said, like we fell in the 90s, but we were in
earlier on.
Yeah.
I think if you have
questions, I want to keep moving along here. I apologize, but we've had some questions about what is the process of joining and becoming a member. Mara, you're the newbie, and everybody's process is different. You don't come from the kibbutz, but can one of you talk about, what is the process of joining, of becoming a citizen?
Well, I'll tell you how I became a kibbutz member, because it was later on. How it is right now is not just anybody can come to kibbutz Netzer Sereni. Again, it's different for all different kibbutzim, but how it is on Netzer Sereni today, you can't just say, I want to be a member. Are there any houses available, and come into the kibbutz? So today, one of the ways is either if your grandparent was a founding member, or it has to be within the family. So either you had somebody who, you're a family member, a founding member is, your grandparent, or you marry in. So that's how I say I hit the jackpot in more ways than one. But so by marrying Tom, then I, as his partner, living here for at least 5 years. So that was the rule. So I'm here for 5 years. And then after I was here for 5 years, I was up for a vote. So when I was voted in with about 40 other partners of people that were living here on the kibbutz. And it essentially was a vote. You like submit your bio and they publish it in the monthly newsletter. And then they're voting on me, but like, let's be honest, they're voting on Tom, or they're voting on Tom's parents. And if they like them, and if we're in, good relations. And then from that vote, you're voted in. Everyone during my vote was voted in. And
now
then
who votes? Does the entire kibbutz adult community vote?
Yeah, anybody who's a member votes.
Right. And are they limited to a certain number of people, or can you vote in it? Like, is everybody told we can only accept, I don't know, 20 people this year, or
everyone?
No such thing. And Mara, do you know who the people are that voted you down?
I don't. I threw eggs at them. No, but everybody had. So nobody had a perfect score. Nobody had 0 against. This is also so typical kibbutz. The best score you could have gotten was to have like 3 people against you. But that just shows like the ideology of old school kibbutznikim, that they, feel they want to keep it a certain way or keep it a very traditional way.
All right. We're going to move things along here because we're gonna run out of time here. So let's talk about some societal issues. Let's talk for a minute about how mental health issues are addressed. Obviously, everybody at the kibbutz were Holocaust survivors. That's sort of one issue. I always make a point of asking how special needs members are treated, both at a young age and as they get older. So maybe one of you can tell us a little bit about mental health, emotional health issues for members.
Sobi?
No, Tata.
I think every kibbutz member that has any kind of difficulty, it could be a mental health issue or a financial issue or other personal issue, in our kibbutz gets a lot of support. In mental health issues, there was an example of some individual in the kibbutz, for example, that had a drinking problem, and then he went to rehab. And then in order to maintain his soberness, he asked kibbutz members to take a walk with him once a day, and the whole community decided to join and help. And every day somebody else took a walk with him. Other people that have issues have the kibbutz appoints a mentor to help them. You will not find yourself alone if you have any kind of difficulty. In our kibbutz, I can't say that about all kibbutzim because I don't know, but in our kibbutz, I'm happy to say that's the case.
Okay, all right. Sociologist Professor Paula Raymond wrote a book, which I haven't read, but I've read about it, called The Kibbutz Community and Nation Building. And she mentioned that in the 50s, Kibbutz Har refused to buy tea kettles for its members because they worried it would cause couples to spend too much time together in their apartments rather than in the dining hall, in the Chadar Ochel. So that's my segue into COVID. How has COVID affected kibbutz life and moved people back into their homes, maybe as opposed to the Chadar Ochel? What has it been like?
Oh, I would say the opposite.
Okay.
Because, we in the first quarantine, we just shut the kibbutz down for 7 weeks. No one could enter, no one could go out and, part of, I don't know, groceries, but if you don't have to work outside, you don't go outside. And the kibbutz was a safe zone, and the kids were always out, and we were doing, I don't know, up until now, the guys we're doing gym at the grass outside our Tom and Mara's house and my house, because everything was shut down, and one came from the military and was, a commander, and he's doing the gym. So we're all went outside and done everything together versus, everyone in their homes. But the teapot is, they talked about radio then and TV, and the first cow, they always said this would kill the kibbutz. The first cow will kill the kibbutz. And we managed. somehow.
Right. Let's shift for a minute to education. We've had some questions on education. Do you have to recruit teachers, or do all the teachers live there, or do they sort of come in from other places? And would you say the education is better, the same, or would you like to see it improve relative to other places? And the third thing I'll throw at you is, do some members go outside the kibbutz for school? Are there some maybe kids who are particularly gifted and they go to some other school, or for whatever reason, like our family's allowed to do that? So I know I threw a lot at you on education, but let's hit it.
So the education, as Tom and I grew up, was very in the kibbutz, and our like legendary nature teacher, Rivka Bakun, was from Auschwitz town, and she was the legendary teacher about nature. And we used to study outside in the orchard, going to the cows. We were spending a lot of time out there. Nowadays we have kibbutz school in the, how do you say matzah? Like
council.
The council. So the kids take bus, and it's a different.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so the kids leave and go to their sort of quote unquote neighborhood school these days. Is that right?
It's a very quote neighborhood, because the only kibbutz there, and they have like moshav there, and it's very different. But up until then, like Tom and Mara have small kids, they are in the kibbutz with the daycare and the kindergarten. So it's like it's you're keeping the education as you want it to be. And sure, Tom and Mara has a neighbor that she's Olympic swimmer, and her parents sent her to this special school so she can, you know, easily train to be a swimmer that you want to be, and she succeeded. So you can definitely choose other passes.
Right. And we have a couple minutes left. Let's talk for a second about, you know, what are some of the problems that the kibbutz faces as we kind of look into the future, the need for more and better housing, you know, what kind of community planning is there? And, you know, obviously there are generations, right? Kibbutzim are multi-generational communities. You have seniors living at the kibbutz. What is the sort of promise and lifestyle for seniors on the kibbutz?
Well, one thing I also, and I see also the question here, but for senior housing that I just want to jump into is that we have here, like in the heart of the kibbutz, there is the retirement home. So it's something where, you know, if you're living here, it's multi-generational. It's 3 or 4 generations that are coexisting all together. So your grandparents, like kids and the parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, everybody is all together. It's something, it's like a model that I don't know where else, quite frankly, and you know, that you're going to see this model. But I think the fact that that's placed there, like a senior home, is in the heart of the kibbutz, really speaks a lot to the future of what the kibbutz looks like.
Oh, that's fantastic. So what do each of you think? Could the kibbutz structure be created today, or do you think it was really an outgrowth of a particular time and circumstances? And it doesn't particularly matter because it does exist, but what do you think?
My personal opinion, and it's obviously just my personal opinion, is that it was a unique form of life that served a certain cause when it was created. I find it hard to believe that such a form of life could be established today. But I think that kibbutzim that have a strong source of income, a factory or a company that provides all the needs for all the members, will continue to thrive and continue to exist because it's comfortable and it provides to everybody. And kibbutzim that don't have that will have to struggle with the glue that holds them together as a kibbutz and not turn just into another suburb.
Well, on the contra, my brother, my 37 years old brother, is living in a commune and some kind of a new kibbutz that the Bonim Dror is founding. And like he's with his friend from the army, from the Nahal. So they are trying to build something new, different from his own kibbutz. And they have like 2,000 something members in this group, like they have several of communities. So maybe, but they're unique, you know. It's
So before we finish, I never like to finish before I ask all of my participants to share with us a memory that represents, you know, one of your most meaningful Israel or Jewish experiences. It certainly doesn't have to be kibbutz related, but would you mind doing that? Do each of you have something that comes to mind of something you've experienced that's very Israel or?
My oldest son, Omer, when he was 13, he went to the shul, he did like Aliyah Torah. And when we were 13, the only one that did it, I think, was Tom, because his parents came from the city and it was very important to them, so Tom would do it. But we all like, who's doing Aliyah Torah? What's is it for you? And not only my son done it, the one who trained him to is my best friend's husband, Avi. So my best friend, Duli, is married to a religious or ex-religious husband. And so it's just like, you know, you can be everything. You can live in a kibbutz, you can grow your kids, and they can go to do Aliyah Torah, and it's okay. It's a full story.
Beautiful, beautiful. Tom or Mara?
I think the most Jewish thing that I experience in kibbutz is the challah that my little girls are making every Friday on Gan.
That's the best.
It tastes awful though.
I eat it.
There she goes. Mom eats it. Well, you made Aliyah, so I think we know yours. But was there a seminal moment for you in your experience that was a?
I mean, I think like I'm also a tour guide, and I go to Jerusalem maybe like once a week, and I go to the Kotel and take groups there quite often. But I think like my moment that stands out is the first time like I was pregnant with my first child with Geffen, and I went to the Kotel, and I never really had a moment. And I feel like being pregnant at the Kotel was this very overwhelming feeling for me of having like a Sabra baby and having a child, like 3 children that are born here in Israel, and then having them grow up on the kibbutz. You know, they get a free Jewish education, and they having them correct my Hebrew or hearing them sing the songs that I learned growing up, that it's just ingrained in life here and ingrained in the school system, is just a really very overwhelming feeling.
Well, I couldn't have picked a better way to close our session, and that's why I always ask that question at the end. So in closing, and I think we covered most of the questions, so unfortunately we've run out of time, but in closing and on behalf of all of us, let me say thank you to Netta and Mara and Tom and Shoshana and all of you for joining us today. Please stay tuned for an announcement on the next installment of our Israel Connection series. We don't have anything scheduled just yet, but we'll put it out. And we're going to wrap things up with another classic Shalom Hanoch song, this time with shorter, grayer hair, called Gitara V'Kinor. So, Lehitraot, Toda Rabah, until next time.
בדירה קטנה, חשוכה מעט, לא רחוק מכאן, בסמטה בצד, גר בחור אחד, עם אישה אחת, חיים מכל הבא ליד. נישאים הם סחור וסחור, וגיטרה היא כינור, מחליפים מיטב כשהחורף בא, איתו למבט הוא שוקע בה, אחר כך יד, נגיעה קלה, נשיקה באוויר, הוא שולח לה. מסתלסלת סחור וסחור, כמו גיטרה וכינור, הוא על זמן והיא עלו. בלילות שישי, במוצאי שבת, אוהבים הרבה, מדברים מעט, מנגנים דואט, ובבת אחת הצלילים עולים והלב נרעש. נישאים הם סחור וסחור, וגיטרה היא כינור, כשהקיץ בא הם פורסים כנף בעקבות חלום שחלמו בסתיו, והם לא אמרו אם הם יחזרו מהרי נפאל, מערבות פרו. נודדים שם סחור וסחור, הוא על זמן והיא אלון, עם גיטרה וכינור. בדירה קטנה חשוכה מעט, לא רחוק מכאן, בסמטה בצד, גר בחור אחד עם אישה אחת. אתה התחלת.